Hello everybody. Hi everybody. Hmm. Hey Margot Shepherd, how are you? Thanks. Well, Dolores, hi all. Says hi all. And Bonnie Firestone. Hey Margot Shepherd, how are you? Hi everyone. Ooh, sorry I got to cut off the echo. I think it's off now. How's my sound, by the way? Please give me some visual feedback so I know. Hi Lana. And the two other people who joined, whose name I cannot see yet. I'm going to try to sit up as straight as I can tonight. I know one of my faults is that I hunch over. The reason why I do that is my vision is not as good as it might be. My reading glasses are probably not strong enough, but when I put on my strong reading glasses, it's really no better because they're too strong. I need something in the middle. Yeah, Bonnie's laughing at that. Okay, so Bernie going forward. I'm going to assume my sound is good. Hey, Bonnie, is it good? Honey, is my sound good? Sorry? Oh, good. Thank you. Okay, so let's sort of take a look at some of the weaknesses that have shown themselves in the primaries. Okay, and by the way, I don't set that much store by the supposed weaknesses that Bernie has. And I guess I should start off by explaining why I'm not sure I take those weaknesses as seriously as many of the other commentators do. First of all, I think what actually produced the Super Tuesday victories for Biden was a combination, of course, of the South Carolina route, which in turn was produced by the endorsement of by Clyburn in South Carolina. Clyburn is a hero among the blacks in South Carolina. And so, even though many of them may have been considering voting for Bernie, as soon as Joe Biden got the endorsement, okay, of Clyburn, it really changed a lot of minds there because Clyburn is so respected. Now, he's respected because of his work in the civil rights movement a long time ago, and I guess he's also served people there in a very personal way during his time in the House and as he rose to power. He's part, okay, of Nancy Pelosi's team. So he has a great deal of influence in South Carolina. Very atypical influence for a single figure in the United States. He is really hugely important. So the people in South Carolina were sort of facing a situation where they didn't know if they had permission, quote unquote, to vote for Joe Biden in South Carolina because he had done badly in the first three of the primaries. And the main question there was the electability of the candidate, which was also the main question in 2008. Okay, if you recall, when South Carolina people found that it was possible for Obama to win in the very white states of Iowa and New Hampshire, they happily flocked to him in 2008. In other words, those victories gave them permission to leave Hillary Clinton and to go over to Obama in 2008. And then Obama was off to the races after that happened. So in 2008, that was very important. In 2020, Joe Biden had done poorly in the first three contests, including Nevada, which was a rout. But Clyburn said to them, look, I have confidence. I'm endorsing Joe Biden. You can vote for him. He can be trusted. I vouch for him. Basically, Clyburn was vouching for Joe Biden and changing minds because people didn't know whether to vote for Bernie, who had run a very active campaign actually down there, and I think was changing many minds down there. But people were wondering, should they go away from Joe Biden, who had been the VP in 2008 and served for 2 terms, and they concluded they had permission. So they went to him, and that produced the rout in South Carolina going into Super Tuesday. Then, of course, Joe Biden and the establishment, including, I suspect, Obama in the background, was able to pull together in just a few days the coalition that led to Buttigieg leaving the campaign, Klobuchar actually leaving the campaign. I'm not sure it had anything to do with Tom Steyer's leaving the campaign. I think that had to do with his loss in South Carolina after he had invested so much money there. But when the other two left the campaign, okay, and when Beto was prevailed upon also to endorse Joe Biden, and when he got also the endorsements in a big affair in Texas, okay, of Amy and Pete, it just looked like a whole bunch of people were again giving people permission to go back to Joe Biden, where they hadn't been sure of it before. They hadn't been sure of the electability of Joe Biden. But the big victory in South Carolina was suggesting to them that he was an electable candidate. They did not take into account that he was highly electable in South Carolina because of Clyburn's endorsement and because of the memory of Obama. Now, why this influenced Texas people so much, since the issue down there really is Biden going to be electable in Texas against Donald Trump? That is, of course, highly doubtful. Highly doubtful. Okay. But of course, the black constituency in Texas took South Carolina, okay, as evidence. And they voted accordingly, giving huge margins to Biden in Texas and facilitating, essentially cutting short, okay, the momentum of Bernie Sanders in Texas and wiping out the huge portion of votes that he got from the Hispanics. Now, this isn't a clean analysis. The reason why it isn't a clean analysis is because uh, there were other things that manifested themselves in Texas that were special circumstances. And those things were voter suppression and perhaps also rigging and hacking the vote. How did they suppress the vote? Well, they closed a whole bunch of polling places where young people were known to vote, okay, in disproportionate numbers, and where Hispanics were known to vote, okay, in disproportionate numbers. And they didn't suppress the vote in those areas where they thought that Biden was going to do well. So that had an effect there. You can look at that as a weakness, okay, of Bernie, that in most of these states, his people are not in control of the voting machinery and not in control of the legislatures. So you can get a lot of voter suppression and rigging and hacking that tends to destroy advantages that Bernie might have in the state and enthusiasm and support that he might have in the state. Weaknesses like this can do something to undercut that. Now, I think voter suppression and rigging and hacking were factors most probably in Massachusetts. We know there's evidence, okay, in Massachusetts that there's an 8% discrepancy between what the exit polls were saying and what the vote was for Biden compared to the votes for Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. In other words, Bernie Sanders lost 8 points from the exit polls to the final recorded result, 8.4 points, and Elizabeth Warren lost 8.2 points. This might have been due to hacking, okay, of the voting machines in certain areas in Massachusetts. There is this discrepancy in exit polls, and it is unexplained, okay, in any other way. And it's a statistically significant discrepancy in these exit polls in Massachusetts. The point here is that Biden's victories, okay, in many states can be attributed to weaknesses that Bernie has that are not weaknesses in his political positioning or weaknesses in the issue positioning he has, or even weaknesses with the demographics. In other words, there might be, well, I guess it is tied to weaknesses, okay, in demographics because the demographic maps, okay, are what is guiding the voter suppressors and the riggers, okay, and the hackers. So I suppose it is related to weaknesses in certain groups or supposed weaknesses in certain groups. So let's see what these weaknesses were in many of the Super Tuesday states that Bernie was supposed to do fairly well in or win, and that he lost in many cases by sizable margins. First, of course, people point to black voters, okay, who were older, and older voters, okay, in general, people over 45, people over 65 or 65, okay, and older. Also, older white high education women voters went disproportionately for Joe Biden. In spite of his record when it comes to feminism. They still went for him. Also, Bernie was weak among suburban women voters. And many of the commentators on the progressive side today, and yesterday, were saying, well, one of the best things he can do for his campaign at this point is strengthen himself with suburban women voters, and especially high education women voters in the suburbs, by but by offering the vice presidential nomination to Warren. And they're saying that is probably one of the best ways for Bernie to strengthen his hand right now, and he really needs Warren to endorse him and to get on board. And if necessary to get her, he should select her as his VP and his running mate. Okay, of course, I think there are many of us who have difficulties with that, okay, for other reasons. But from the standpoint, okay, of electability, that certainly may be a suggestion which is a useful one. Okay, though Warren has her weaknesses as well, but from the electability point of view, we have to be very clear about that. Okay. Now, there was another weakness that was exhibited, and that was among the young voters, but that was different. That was not so much a congenital weakness, okay, among young voters, because they went overwhelmingly for Bernie across the country, including in minority groups, including among Hispanics and including among blacks. There was actually a divide in the black vote between the older black voters and the younger black voters who did go for Bernie. So, what was the problem with turnout, okay, among the younger voters? Of course, a lot of the commentators are saying that the problem there may be that they're just not as enthusiastic as they were in 2016, and they're not showing up for Bernie this time. But we don't see this in Bernie's rallies. We don't see this in any state when we look at his rallies, the size of his rallies, the makeup of the rallies. We're not looking at that. We're looking at a tremendous amount of enthusiasm among the younger voters. The question is, why are they not getting to the polls? Well, it could be voter suppression, could be rigging, it could be hacking. The opposition could be rigging and hacking the vote in those precincts where they know the young voters are going to show up. It may be the real turnout is far higher than what is being recorded in the system. We don't have an easy way of knowing that, but certainly there are stories, there are narratives that are going to be surfacing about what happened on Super Tuesday in many of these states. And we will find out whether young voters were targeted, whether that was one of the demographics that was actually targeted for the voter suppression, for the rigging, okay, and for the hacking. So it may not be a failure of young voters to turn out. It may be a failure of the party to run an honest primary. That may be what we're looking at here. Now, there's another Bernie weakness we can easily put our finger on, and that is that for many, the implied change to democratic socialism coming with the election of Bernie is frightening. Okay. Now, polls show mixed results, okay, on this. For the first time in years and years and years, there are more people favorable to socialism than are currently favorable to capitalism. But probably people who are favorable to capitalism are concentrated in the older age brackets. And they may be concentrated among the older black voters and the older white voters. And they may be concentrated among the suburban women voters because suburban women voters are doing pretty well under the current system, which they see as a capitalist system. So it may be that the socialism issue is cutting strongly in favor of Biden in the particular demographics that favor him. That may be one of the reasons why those demographics, okay, are favoring him. So now let's get to some of Bernie's strengths. Well, first of all, on the stump, when he's talking to people, when he's in his rallies, okay, when he's in a debate setting and things like that, he's always far stronger than Biden. Far, far stronger. And by the way, going forward, for the first time, if he's in a debate, okay, with Biden, and the 11th debate is coming up, I think it won't be coming up in time for the primaries next Tuesday, but on March 10th, but it'll be coming up by March 15th. I think the next debate is on March 15th. And there will be only 3 survivors in that particular debate. In fact, there may be only 2. The third survivor could be Tulsi Gabbard, because technically, according to the current rules, which may already have been changed by the DNC, okay, I didn't notice it today. There was a lot of speculation that they were going to change the rules on the fly so that they would exclude Tulsi Gabbard, because their previous rules said that if someone had one delegate vote, they would qualify for the debate. But now suddenly they may decide, well, after all, Tulsi's got only 1 delegate vote, so she doesn't have a chance to win, so she doesn't deserve a chance to be on the debate stage. Of course, people who are going to argue this way know very well that if she is on the debate stage, then having Tulsi on the debate stage and Bernie on the debate stage, both working against Joe Biden, may be a situation that exploits Biden's weaknesses. So at all costs, they at least want to keep Tulsi off the debate stage. That's probably a strong reason, okay, to deny her a place. They can do it if they want to. They have the power, as they showed in court. Their corporation, which is current law, it's on appeal, but presently it's current law, that since they're a corporation, they can handle their internal contests, okay, in any way they want. They don't even have to have any internal contests, and they can change the rules, okay, at any time, just like any corporation can. Now, I don't find this a convincing argument, but this is the current interpretation of the law, okay, at this time. So they're probably going to use that to get Tulsi out of there. That is, after all, part of the rigging. That's among the things they can do to rig the primary. They're probably going to do it. They're probably not going to let her in. So therefore, it's likely to be down to two, to Biden and Sanders, one-on-one in that particular debate. Now that's going to be a 2-hour debate. Can Biden survive 2 hours of debating Bernie Sanders, even with all the moderators on his side? On Biden's side, okay, not on Bernie's side? Can he survive 2 hours of debating with Sanders, who will talk about all the issues that Biden is weak on? I don't think so. What's going to happen to his credibility? What's going to happen to his electability when Bernie tears him apart? I mean, if Bernie can tear him apart on the debate stage using entirely fair tactics based on the issues, strictly on the issues, then the question arises, what can Trump do to Biden when he's going to lie and he's going to cheat and he's going to talk fast and he's going to make fun of Biden and he's going to use all kinds of illegitimate tactics to picture Biden as a witless, helpless, hapless, and senile old man? What's going to happen then? What would happen to Biden if he really was the nominee of the party? When people get a chance to see that on March 15th and following March 15th, there might be a sudden rush away from Biden. I mean, who's going to give them permission to vote for Biden then? Even if Obama came out with a strong endorsement of Biden, would people really listen when they see what kind of weaknesses Biden has in debates, even when the debate is honest and fair? I mean, Bernie will subject him to strong criticisms all throughout that particular debate. Now, I know there's a possibility of a sympathy reaction for Biden, maybe persuading people they ought to stay with him. But I suppose Bernie will make the point at some point in the debate that, look, this is what I did here. I talked only about the issues. I criticized him only on the issues. I was completely fair in this whole debate, pointing out, his real weaknesses. And I don't think our front runner looks very strong or looks very good or is likely to survive the attack of Donald Trump, which will make use of every dirty trick in the debating book in order to eliminate Joe Biden from contention. Shouldn't you be running away from Joe Biden now as fast as your legs will carry you? Do you really want to see Trump get in office again? Is Joe Biden electable? I mean, that should be the summary of Bernie's debate performance if Biden decides to get on the stage with him. Now, maybe the party will arrange it so suddenly Biden doesn't have to get on the stage with Bernie. But then, of course, Trump will use that, and Bernie can campaign based on the idea that Biden was afraid to meet him in a one-on-one debate, but he won't be able to get away from Trump that way. He's going to have to go against Trump in a one-on-one debate, and then he can go through all the tactics that Trump is likely to use on Biden and ask people, will Biden survive that? Can he, I think Bernie can make a very strong case on those particular grounds. So, here are the strong issues for Bernie and the Biden weaknesses. Social Security. Biden worked to cut Social Security and Medicare. And he worked to do this for some time. And there are those TV clips about it. And the latest time he worked against it was when he was working with Obama to try to make a deal to get the chain CPI to cut Social Security for seniors. Do the older black voters that he's weak with, do they know this? Do they really know this? Do the older white voters, do they really know this? Do they really know his record on that? Now, Bernie referred to it, a bit earlier in the campaign, and he did gain on Biden then with that. But when Bloomberg came into the campaign, Bernie turned basically to run against the billionaires and Bloomberg. And Bernie had a part in knocking him out, as did Elizabeth Warren, who attacked him on the misogyny issue very, very strongly and very, very successfully. But for a while, there was a deflection away from Biden's weaknesses because they were concentrating on the Bloomberg distraction. And because everybody thought, well, they'd already exposed Biden as weak, and what could have saved him after 3 straight losses? He might win in South Carolina, but everybody expected him to win in South Carolina. So why was that going to trigger a return to Biden by so many people? Well, a return by Bernie to critiquing Biden on his stances on Social Security and on Medicare. I mean, he was for cutting Medicare too. I mean, it's not even that he's not for Medicare for all. He's for cutting Medicare. Period. He talks about having a public option, and making it better for people. But he's never said how he's going to cut costs. He's never said how he's going to protect people from bankruptcy in his public option type of system. He's open to substantial criticism from the Medicare for All position, contrasting that with his own positions on Medicare over the years and his current proposals for Medicare. He's open to criticism on his Green New Deal ideas. No way are they comparable to Bernie's ideas. No way. And the Green New Deal is one where the older white high education voters both male and female, that issue bothers them. They want that Green New Deal. As do the younger voters. That cuts across a lot of the demographics. Cuts across a lot of the demographics. So how is Biden going to deal with Bernie's criticisms of his green platform, which are going to be substantial? They're in no way comparable to Bernie's program. No way. Now, what about Biden's activities in the early 2000s in sabotaging the possibility of going into Chapter 7 for people to escape from their medical debt and from their credit card debt? I mean, Biden led the drive to make that impossible for regular people. And he caused so much harm and so much pain to people for the sake of the credit card companies. The senator from MBNA, not voting for the interests of his people, his public, but voting for the interests of his donors, the bankers. I mean, that fits right into Bernie's narrative. Then there's the war and peace issue. Who voted for the Iraq war, and not only voted, led the charge. And who voted against going into the Iraq war? And who's been trying to get us out of all the excesses in the Middle East? Bernie. And who's been supporting all the excesses in the Middle East, including the bombing, of Yemen? Joe. Smokey Joe. Old Joe. Uncle Joe. You know, there was another Uncle Joe one time. His last name was Stalin. Don't forget that. Sorry, my name is Joe too, so I'm entitled. So next we come to Biden's uncompromising position on trade. He is still foursquare behind the kinds of trade deals Obama tried to negotiate. The trade deals that have bankrupted much of the Midwest in the United States, that have left communities devastated, high unemployment rates, and even where the employment rates have gotten better, the wages are far, far lower, and the industrial capacity of the United States has been hurt. That's a threat to national security. Right now, today on the Rising show, Crystal Ball and Sagar Anjetti's show, they had a guest, a general, I forget his name, who talked about the idea that our supply chain for medicines and drugs, for almost all of them now, even when we manufacture the drug here, the basic elements we use to create the pharmaceuticals, and very often the pharmaceuticals themselves, are manufactured in China. So we are dependent on China for our healthcare treatments. We no longer have the capacity here to manufacture from start to finish, even when we're doing some of the manufacturing here. That's what these trade deals have done for us, okay, in that area. And the general also brought out that key parts for our bombers are currently made in China, manufactured in China, no longer manufactured here, or maybe never manufactured here in the first place. That was really ridiculous. Free trade has gone to such extremes that our national security in the United States is compromised. Okay, and Bernie can bring that out. Now, the TPT deal, the TPP deal, and the other trade deals that were being negotiated by the Obama administration at the time, the North Atlantic trade deal, those were deals. Those were deals that enshrined the investor state dispute system, the ISDS system, where corporate tribunals can render findings that basically levy taxes on the U.S. federal government for violations of the trade deals found by these corporate tribunals. Those were the trade deals that Biden favored. Now, even the renegotiation of NAFTA by Trump that he has just completed, I don't think it's quite been ratified by the Congress yet, but even that trade deal is better than what Biden was advocating for because it removes the ISDS provision. It leaves some remnants of it, giving special advantages to the fossil fuel companies, okay, in other countries. But outside of that, for other corporations and other types of trade, ISDS is gone. That's a tremendous improvement in Trump's trade deal. And his trade deal is much to the left on trade of where Biden was. Bernie, who opposed the TPP and the other trade deals all the time, can bring that out and can raise the contrast. And that's a contrast that hits at all of Biden's weaknesses in the Midwest and in every one of the states, including many of the southern states, where industry has basically been destroyed by these free trade pacts that we followed for so long. Okay, then of course there's Bernie's opposition to the crime bill. Yes, I know he voted for it because the Violence Against Women Act was wrapped into the trade deal, so he thought that he had to vote for it. But he expressed his opposition to it at that time, and every year thereafter he's worked to get the crime bill modified. Well, the crime bill has put a large proportion of black people in jail since it was passed right up to this time, exacting extreme damage to minorities, not only black minorities, but Hispanics as well. Then there are, of course, the stop and frisk issues, which Biden was basically supportive. He was supportive, okay, of Bloomberg when Bloomberg was the mayor, okay, of New York, okay, and Bloomberg was applying stop and frisk to all manner of things, including to the Occupy movement. So Bernie can talk about that too. Then finally, there is the issue of authenticity, or in this case, in more common sense terms, there's the issue, okay, of honesty. How many times has Biden lied to people in this particular campaign? He was never arrested in South Africa when he was there on Mandela's behalf. He was never arrested there. The record there is clear. It's public knowledge. People on the left have been talking about it, but the mainstream won't call attention to it. Bernie can call attention to it in debates. He can call attention to the lying there. He can call attention to the lying about Biden's involvement in the civil rights movement. He can call attention to Biden's lying when it came to his plagiarism, but during the 1980s. In other words, he plagiarized. First of all, he plagiarized when he was in college, I believe in law school, and he was caught at it. And then he plagiarized again in speeches he made, okay, in 1988, and he was caught at that. Now, Biden has a long history of lying about what he's done. And the record is clear. That's a little more sensitive for Bernie to go after. But Bernie has got to take advantage, okay, of everything, because now he's got to knock Biden out of contention. He's got to win on the first round. Because the truth is, the people running the Democratic Party would rather lose to Donald Trump with Joe Biden than to either lose or win against Donald Trump with Bernie Sanders. They just don't want to see Bernie Sanders there as the nominee of the Democratic Party, spreading his views on what is just and fair and what is in the interest of people. They don't want to see that at the head of the ticket. They absolutely don't want to see that, because they know that would be the beginning of the end for this whole cluster of people who are currently part of the ruling class, not because they're the extremely wealthy people who are part of the ruling class, and not because they're members of the communications elites, okay, or anything like that, but just because they happen to be the political specialists representing the ruling class in the United States. So Bernie is going to have to draw all these contrasts. If he does draw these contrasts, he will erase his weaknesses. He will attract all these demographics because he has something for each one of them. And once the probabilities of Biden's winning fall once more to what they were before South Carolina, when he drives them down once again, there will be no way that the establishment will be able to raise those probabilities again. No way. It won't be possible to give people permission to nominate Joe Biden as opposed to Bernie Sanders. So how is this going to go? Now, once again, let's look at the primary calendar. On March 10th, There's Idaho, there's Michigan, there's Mississippi, and Missouri, and North Dakota, okay, and Washington. Now, I don't know where the polls stand at the moment. They might very well change over the next few days anyway, because I don't think that Biden can capitalize on the momentum he has now by campaigning. He can't campaign to increase whatever margins he might have in these states, because as a campaigner, he's a disaster. So he's going to stay out of these states for the next week. He's just going to throw up ads there. He'll have the money now to throw up ads there, if only because Bloomberg will probably give him a lot of it. But will the ads be enough? Will they be enough against Bernie's ads, which Bernie has enough money to get, and against Bernie's campaigning, and against Bernie's organization in the various states? Bernie's well organized in Idaho. He won that state. Oh, Bonnie is signaling to me to sit up straight. He won that state in 2016. He won in Michigan in 2016. Okay, as you know, he's well organized in Michigan. He's well organized there. We saw that when he campaigned in Michigan earlier this year. In Mississippi, he has a mayor with high influence among black people in Mississippi who's going to be campaigning with him. That should get him some delegates in Mississippi. I know Biden is heavily favored there, but Jim Clyburn is not a power in Mississippi. However, Mayor Lumumba is. He is a power. Okay, and then there are the Missouri primaries. Where local blacks are being brutalized by the police. Standard operating procedure. Are they really going to vote for Biden over Bernie? I mean, are they really going to do that? When they hear Bernie's agenda? When they hear what he's going to do for the civil rights movement? When they compare that with Biden's crime bill and how they've suffered under the crime bill? I don't think so. There's no Jim Clyburn there in Missouri. Who's going to support Biden there? Claire McCaskill? Who's going to scream, he's a socialist, he's a socialist, he's a socialist? I think Bernie's going to get some delegates there. I'm not saying he's going to win there. But I am saying on March 10th he's going to come back. He's going to come back with Michigan, with Idaho, maybe with Mississippi, maybe with North Dakota, certainly with Washington. He's going to get a big margin in Washington, and I think he's going to get a big margin in Michigan. The only thing I'm wary of is Michigan is run by an establishment Democrat. I don't know how much she and the state party in Michigan is given to rigging the vote. They weren't doing it in 2016. We know that because Bernie had a surprise win there. If they were rigging it, he never would have gotten close to Hillary, in Michigan. He had a surprise win there. It gave him a little momentum at the time, which he had lost on Super Tuesday. The latest polls in Michigan showed Bernie behind because of the momentum from Super Tuesday. But, of course, his team's working there now, and he'll be there campaigning. And I think those polls are going to turn around for him because I think there's already a predisposition to vote for him. And I don't think the black community in Detroit is particularly appreciative of the efforts, okay, of Obama and Biden on their behalf. I don't think so. I don't think they have the same political attitudes as the Southern blacks. Not the community that voted in Rashida Tlaib. No, sir. Then there's March 17th. Guess where Bernie is tonight? He's in Phoenix, Arizona. He's in Phoenix, Arizona, where he's mobilizing Hispanics and other minorities in his favor in an explosive rally, which I got to see a little bit of before I had to come on here. Now the Florida primaries, oh, that's probably going to be a bad state for Bernie. It's really, first of all, there's the Castro issue, a false issue, which people will not see as a false issue because they're so sensitive about it, but down there. Uh, and of course, a lot of the blacks in Florida are like blacks in Georgia and like blacks in South Carolina, which is with similar political attitudes, and they may be strong Biden folks. I did notice, though, that Andrew Gillum won the primary when he was running for governor, and he won it on a Medicare for All platform. Then he ran away from Medicare for All, okay, in the general when he was running against the governor, the now governor, DeSantis. Okay, and I think Ron DeSantis got elected because Andrew Gillum ran away from Medicare for All and gave himself a disadvantage among certain elements of the Hispanic population there. The Puerto Rican Hispanics, for example. But bottom line in Florida, I think a lot of the weaknesses, okay, of Biden can be brought to bear in Florida if Bernie talks about them. And some of the strengths of Bernie can also be brought to bear in Florida. Okay, I don't think Bernie's going to win in Florida. I won't even say he's going to pull even, but he's going to get some delegates in Florida. It's not going to be a total wipeout, okay, for Joe Biden. But on the other side, if Bernie does well on the 10th, then when Bernie gets to Illinois, there's going to be considerable enthusiasm for him. If I recall correctly, I believe he won the Illinois primary in 2016, or certainly did surprisingly well there. I remember clearly he won the Indiana primary. And by the way, where the hell is the Indiana primary this year? Well, when is it? Okay, but anyway, I believe he did win. Did he win it? Nope. It was Clinton who won it in 2016. Okay, sorry. Okay, I take that back. But I think Bernie did fairly well there, and I think he's positioned to do well there now. I don't think the blacks, okay, in Illinois uh, will be that friendly to Biden. And I think there's a Hispanic population, okay, in Illinois, which is also beginning to become significant right now. Okay, it's not like it is out west, but it's a substantial group. I think Bernie can appeal to blacks, okay, in Illinois, and he can appeal to Hispanics, okay, in Illinois, and he can appeal to progressives, okay, in Illinois, who are white. And if he can bring his whole program to bear, including his development program for rural areas, which in some parts, okay, of Illinois are in a bad way, I think this time he can win Illinois, and maybe by a big margin. Okay, in Ohio, you have a situation which is a bit different, okay, from Michigan, but in some ways, okay, it's similar to Michigan. And I think Bernie can be competitive there. I think he can be competitive there. Okay, I'm not going to go further, but I think that I've argued reasonably for the idea that Bernie is likely to gain ground again from March 10th through March 17th. And by the way, don't forget, there's a debate coming on March 15th when Biden is likely to get slaughtered by Bernie. And that will probably carry over to the primaries on the 17th because people will be watching it. I'm not sure where the debate will be. But the influence of who wins that debate is likely to have some impact on these four primaries as well. So I think we have to look again after March 17th and see what Bernie's prospects are then going forward and see what they are. See what they are in terms of the framework, okay, that I've given you. The demographic groups that I spoke about and the issues, okay, I spoke about, and how successful Bernie was in bringing the issues to bear that are important for each of the demographics in which he has shown some weaknesses. And then at that point, we'll know more how successful he's being. But don't get me wrong, I don't think that Bernie, by any stretch of the imagination, will have caught up to and wiped out Joe Biden by the end of March 17th. I don't think that's going to happen. Also, I think Biden is probably going to do well in Georgia, not as well as he did in South Carolina, certainly. But probably Biden will have Stacey Abrams support, okay, in Georgia, and Bernie is going to have to get over that. But I think he can talk issues in Georgia, and I think he can get his populism going in Georgia quite a bit better than he could do in South Carolina. I also think that Bernie, with the support of the mayor of San Juan, can do very well in Puerto Rico on the 29th. They've got 51 delegates there. Georgia has 105. It could be Bernie could combine his delegates in those two and come out with a wash and not have a situation where Biden gains an appreciable amount of delegates on the 24th and the 29th. Then we move into April, and we'll talk about that when April comes and see how successful Bernie has been in recouping what happened on Super Tuesday and going ahead of Joe Biden once again. In other words, once again becoming the front runner. I do think that by the time that Bernie gets to April 28th, to the Excella primaries, he has to be the front runner, at that point. And he has to have brought his major issues to bear successfully on those Democrats, on those demographics where he has been weak. I think the key here is the tying of the issues he talks about in each state to the demographic groups where he's been weak. If he can do that, I think he can still prevail, get and get a majority in these primaries. By the way, the Indiana primary is going to be May 5th. Mayor Pete, of course, is going to campaign in Indiana in support, of Joe Biden. And I'd like to see how well Mayor Pete does statewide in his own home state. I don't think that's going to be as easy for him as it was, in Iowa, where the mainstream wasn't covering what the black people of South Bend really thought about their great mayor. So that's what I think. I hope I was cogent. I know my chin kept on going below the horizon. I've got that staring at things going. I'll try to get better one of these years. I'll get there. In the meantime, I want to check in with you and see what you've had to say. But before I do, let me remind you to please share, like, and subscribe. And please become a patron at www.patreon.com/Joe underscore Firestone. Sorry, that's the wrong view. This is the right view. I'll check in with you now and see what you've had to say. So if you'll bear with me, I'll refresh my screen because I'm sure I haven't gotten all your comments. Okay. There we go. I see most of you are still here. Thank you. And very good. Let's see what comments you had. Steve says Bernie has to stop being nice. Barbara says Trump will destroy him. I'm sure, Barbara, you're talking about how he's gonna destroy Joe Biden. Let me cut off the echo here. Sorry. Okay, I had to cut off the echo. Anyway, Russ said, I saw the expression dementia addled. You think Trump's going to use that expression? And say something like, I'm sorry, my dementia addled friend. I'm going to put you out of your misery tonight. Maybe he'll say that. Everybody will say, oh, how mean Trump is. How mean Trump is. Carmen says, Bernie put out a pretty good ad against Biden today. And his assets cuts favoritism. Yes, he was very supportive of SS cuts since the 1980s, for God's sake. I mean, it's a generational thing with him. Steve says, look, my mother died of Alzheimer's. I know the signs. It starts slow and becomes progressively faster. By November, Biden could be much worse. Well, I don't really wish this, on anybody, but hopefully his campaign won't be able to hide the signs of it during this coming month, because this month is really crucial. And there has to be a reckoning with Biden's real flaws. The mainstream media and the campaigns and the parties can't be allowed to continue to conspire to hide Joe Biden's very patent unfitness for office from the American people. Steve says, Jimmy Dore has done a couple good shows on Bernie today. I'll bet Jimmy has. Carmen says, so if wishy-washy Warren becomes VP and Biden becomes incapacitated, Warren will pick HRC as her VP? Question mark. I don't know. She doesn't get to pick her VP. She has to get the House to vote for her pick. Now, maybe the House will go for it, but somehow I'm not certain Nancy Pelosi is going to be in control of the House in 2021. So it may not be quite as easy as that. And I'm getting some various emojis from Evelina Apant. It was actually a reply to Steve. And Steve Wolfbrand says, I don't know. I could see Biden picking HRC for his VP. Well, she's popular with the suburbanites. And the thing is, Biden already has the suburbanites going for him. And he has also some parts of the black community going for him. Actually, a very substantial part who'd probably be willing to vote for him, whatever the situation. So that would strengthen him somewhat, but not when he's running against Trump, because Trump's constituencies are entirely different. And they were enough to beat HRC last time. If Biden picks HRC as his VP, he's basically telling people, look, this is HRC running again. She's going to be the real president. I'm only going to be the VP. And in a rematch with Trump, is HRC really going to win? I don't see it. I think HRC is gone for good. Steve says, I really can't understand how young people are not more involved. They basically have no future. Maybe they're not more involved because since they have no future, they have no hope. It requires a little bit of hope to get involved. That's the truth. Carmen says, oh no, I forgot about that, but 45 would have an absolute field day if he picks HRC. Yeah. Okay. Evelina says, they're by far the most interested group. If anything, it's the older folk. Yeah, the older folk are interested, but not really enthusiastic. But the older folks still dutifully march to the polls. I can tell that because I live among the older folks. Since I'm an older folk, and I've seen them getting bussed over to the polls and getting curbside assistance if need be. What's Tulsi's role at this point, Doc? Well, if Tulsi can get into the debate, she might be able to destroy Biden herself, in the course of the debate, in the same way she destroyed the Kamala. She might be able to destroy Biden inside of 5 minutes at the debate. Each party will get a lot more time. So Tulsi could easily have the time to destroy Joe Biden. And in protecting, in destroying Joe Biden herself, she would be protecting Bernie because he wouldn't have to be the mean old man who destroyed Joe Biden. Carmen said, there's a Joe blow. Biden is going to blow it. Okay, and Evelina uh, now gives us a bunch of emojis for that one. And Evelina says, what about involvement in disastrous wars, i.e., Iraq, Biden and Hillary, okay, in the Libyan embassy? Well, that was mostly HRC, I think, but Biden could be blamed for it. He could be blamed for Iraq, certainly. But if we try to attack him on the conduct of Iraq, he might actually then trot out the service record, okay, of Beau Biden, and talk about his son. And I know Tulsi has considerable regard for Joe Biden's son. I don't know why I think Joe Biden would use the memory of his son in a political fashion, okay, in this particular debate. But I kind of think he might do that. Carmen says, so many of my friends and family have been or are in jail and prison. No one judges them because trying to survive is in the economically and socially oppressed by the United States is overwhelming. Carmen says, in this connection, Carmen says, because they're neoliberals and Bernie isn't. Steve says, unfortunately, Bernie doesn't have the killer instinct. He thinks that everyone is his friend. No, I think what it is he thinks he is the friend okay, of everyone, even of those, okay, who disagrees with him. So he makes the assumption that in dealing with him, they're going to be on their best behavior because he's on his best behavior when he deals with them. Barbara says, God, I hope you're right. I hope I'm right too. Barbara says he can't speak. No, he can't speak. Carmen says, I'm so tired of these delegates. They're a thorn in the democratic process. They are. Okay. Evelina says, huge comeback for Bernie. Barbara says, from your lips, please let it be so. Evelina says, feel it in my bones, except Bernie did say he'd drop out if delegates are unfairly given to his opponent. When did he say that? I don't recall that. I would be gratified if he said that, and that if he then embellished on it and said, since there were delegates unfairly given to Joe Biden, that he's not only going to drop out, but he's going to run third party. That's what he needs to do. And Carmen says, even Jesse Jackson said Obama didn't help people of color. Well, that's true, but Jesse now has to say it in support of Bernie Sanders publicly. Bernie says, yep, Florida will be a loss for Bernie. Yeah, I agree, Russ. I agree. Susan Aldrich says, does Bernie need Florida? Not if he does as well as he should in the other states, but he needs delegates in Florida. In other words, there are how many delegates were there in Florida again? 219. I believe there were 219 delegates, okay, in Florida. Okay, among the states that are left, only New York has more delegates, okay, than Florida. I believe in New York there are something like it's either 240 or 274. I think the 274 may include superdelegates, but I think the regular pledge delegates are 240, okay, in New York. So that's more than Florida. Bernie's likely to do much better in New York, I think, than he's likely to do, okay, in Florida. But on the other hand, Ocasio Cortez is probably going to go down and campaign for him in Florida, and the mayor of San Juan is probably going to go down there and campaign for him. Barbara says, I agree with you, not the same as the South. No, not the same as the South. People are culturally different. Rob says, hey, Yoda. Hey, Rob. Barbara says, Florida is not a Bernie stronghold. No, it's not. Partly because of Bernie's occasional truthful comments about Castro and what he did, okay, in Cuba. And Carmen says, I do know some black church members going for Bernie here in Florida, and I was pleasantly surprised. Maybe the influence down there of the Reverend William Barber, head of the Poor People's Campaign in North Carolina. Kay says, too many old, retired, rich people in Florida. They hate Bernie, laugh out loud. There's still a very small proportion, Kay, of the population. But there are a lot of Jewish seniors in Florida, okay, who oppose Bernie because they see him as too friendly to the Palestinians. They do, however, have some conflicts because Bernie would be the first Jewish president, and I know that generally speaking, Jews would really like to see that happen, just as any other group has some degree of identity of politics and wants to see one of their own actually get elected. But of course, it's Bernie's relative lesser degree of friendliness to Israel, especially as compared with the Palestinians, which makes him unpopular with older Jewish people. I think Bernie is very popular with younger Jewish people, though, and in part because of the position he takes towards the Palestinians. And Rob says, since I didn't get a chance to talk with you about the election results in real time, I have a question. Do you think the Democratic establishment committed election fraud? Yes. A friend that's a boomer was looking at the polls and met questioning the results. He was perplexed and gets something was not right. He mentioned the fact that they were this off is way too weird. He actually looked, a bit concerned. He's probably talking about the discrepancy between the exit polls and the final results in Massachusetts. We know this occurred, in Massachusetts. I suspect something was done, in Minnesota too, because I don't see how many of Klobuchar's people would be taking her advice and sticking with Biden after she dropped out. It's almost as if she was able to transfer all the people who would have voted for her over to Biden just on her say so. I mean, I know she's popular in Minnesota, but I think Bernie is very popular in Minnesota too. He won the primary there in 2016, if I recall correctly. Okay, that was one of his strong states. It may have been a caucus back then, but he won it by a substantial margin, if I recall correctly. Carmen said, forgive me for butting in. I posted an article on my Facebook feed today about exit polls showing cheating for Biden. Yep, probably in Massachusetts, Carmen, right? And Evelina says, elder people should be very concerned. Absolutely, they should be very concerned. One thing I forgot to talk about, in the show, in my presentation, which I ought to talk about now because it's very important, and that is the impact of the coronavirus. There are many people who were speculating today that based on the Super Tuesday results, they felt that some people were flocking back to Biden for comfort because the coronavirus was coming, and they were very frightened. And they were seeking essentially comfort in the familiar. And so they were voting for Biden for that reason in such large numbers in the vote that came on the day of the primary, the day of vote, the late voters who wait, until the primary day. So that was a theory that many of them were spouting. I think that's because the argument hasn't had time to circulate that the death rate from the coronavirus is yet likely to be very high, especially among the elderly. It looks now like it might be as much as twice as high among the elderly as it is in the rest of the population. In some places, they've been finding that fatality rates among those who contract the disease are as high as 6%. There's an epidemiologist who has said that over the next period of time, I don't recall as being entirely specific about whether the period was 1 year or 2 or 3. Of course, that makes a big difference as to when the time period is. But let's say, for the sake of argument here, that the time limit is over the next year before a vaccine, is ready. And during that particular time period, uh, there are 30 million people infected with the virus, and 6%, of the elderly among them, let's say 20% of them, are elderly. So that brings it down, from 30 million to 6 million people. And what is 6% of 6 million people? It's something like 300,000 people. No, it's more. It's closer to 400,000 people. 400,000 fatalities among the old. What happens? What happens to Medicare for all when that happens, and when it's revealed that people won't go to doctors because they can't afford the copays and they can't afford the premiums for Medicare supplements, and they can't afford the deductibles for the medications under the present system? What happens when many thousands of others in the system are dying from the coronavirus because they haven't been able to get care, because they took a chance, because they couldn't afford the tests? And by the way, Congress is very proud of itself because it just passed an $8.5 billion bill to fund our response to the coronavirus. However, that bill did not provide absolutely free coverage for people being tested for the coronavirus. Right now, the cost of tests for the coronavirus is $3,000. How many people are not going to go to the doctor and just hope that they don't have the coronavirus when they get some symptoms, or hope that, well, it's probably not going to be fatal for me anyway, so I'm not going to go and be tested. I'm just going to be a carrier because I can't afford the $3,000. When that stuff starts to happen, which may be, by the way, fairly soon now, because it's really starting to spread. It's up in New York now. There are some cases in Rappahannock County in Virginia, I believe, as well. And, of course, cases in California, which is in an emergency state now as a result of that. And, of course, in Washington. So, the coronavirus is spreading rapidly now. People are going to begin to die, and they're going to begin to avoid treatment because of the costs of treatment that they will have under the present system. And who is going to be the beneficiary of that? I think it's going to be the candidate who is for Medicare for all. The coronavirus underlines the need for Bernie's Medicare for all bill, but by the way, an improved Bernie bill. It has to be an improved Bernie bill that will immediately give people full coverage. In other words, just sign them up when they come into the doctor's office. Have the doctors do the damn sign-ups while they're billing the government. Get people in there. Use their social security numbers. Everybody should have it. And there's Biden standing in the way. He's going to stand in the way. He's going to stick with the platform he has now. And Bernie's going to be saying, Joe, look at these people dying from the coronavirus. We need Medicare for all now. We both need to be campaigning against Donald Trump right now to get Donald Trump to pass my Medicare for all bill, but with no waiting periods. We can't afford to indulge the private insurance companies and those who work for them any longer. People are dying, Joe. People are dying, my good friend Joe. That's going to become an argument. And what's going to happen then? And Rob says, I get that the results were way too suspicious given the fact that the New York Times reported that as of the publishing of the article back in February, that Joe had not campaigned in over a month in any of the Super Tuesday states. Excuse me for a minute. In any of the Super Tuesday states. I think at the very least they're rigging the elections, and others who are older are starting to wake up that they might be rigging the elections because something is not right. Maybe. I hope that older folks start to get, an inkling of that. But I was down in the coffee room in my building this morning, and one of my friends there said, oh, Joe Biden's going to win. It's going to be easy. He's going to wipe the floor with Bernie. I said, no. I think Bernie's going to win. And I settled down to have a discussion on the subject. Okay, but my friend said, absolutely not. Joe Biden is just absolutely going to run away with it now. Bernie is out of there already. He's dead. And I knew that I was never going to be able to persuade the friend. So I basically stopped. But Bonnie and I were having a jewelry show in that room anyway, and so we had a little bit of business to do. Kay says, Northeast Ohio seems to have some interest in Bernie. That's where I am. Lots of good jobs lost to the damn trade deals over the years. This used to be a productive place years ago, but it's been going downhill big time, for decades. So many areas in the United States are doing that, in Trump states. There are Virginia places that are like that. The whole state is generally very prosperous, but there are these depressed areas in the southwest of the state and in central Virginia where the economies have been, they're really terrible places to live. I mean, everything is dead there. Okay, that's just in Virginia. When you get into Kentucky, the whole state is a depressed area. And they don't kick out Mitch. I mean, they're crazy. These people, I shouldn't say they're crazy. It's not that they're crazy. People have lost all hope that the political system can or will do something for them. They just don't want to fight. They're just accepting their lot. There are a lot of people here who are like that. Steve Wolfbrand said, I love Yulin. I love Yulin? Sorry, I'm not sure who you're referring to. And Rob says, Carmen, I've been hearing this a lot, even in Massachusetts. I couldn't believe Biden won. That was way too weird. I figured Bernie would have won by 10 points at least, and Warren comes in second. Yeah, I figured that too. And by the way, I think I know what happened. I think there's probably an area of Massachusetts that uses the AccuVote voting machines. The same machines that were used in New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, in the parts of New Hampshire where they were used, they were rigged for Mayor Pete. And the departures from the exit polls in favor of Mayor Pete were in those particular precincts. Probably in Massachusetts, the same thing was true. The voting machines in those areas were probably hacked, and we'll probably find that the discrepancies from the exit polls in those areas are accounted for by the hacking. The discrepancies from the exit polls there were 8.4% for Bernie and 8.2% for Warren, both times in favor of Joe Biden. So that's 16 points given to Joe Biden, more than 16 points, close to 17 points, that were given to Joe Biden that should have gone either to Bernie or to Warren. That's it. That's what you're talking about, Rob. That accounts for it. Barbara says in Puerto Rico, Bernie could sweep. He could. Okay, because in light of the hurricane, and by the way, Bernie has been supporting Puerto Rico for years. He's met with the Puerto Rican ambassador, not at the time of the hurricane, much before that time, back in 2015. Puerto Rico was becoming in dire economic straits due to the hedge fund people, the vultures, people who buy up the public debt and then squeeze the government. The government of Puerto Rico was greatly in debt, and the hedge fund vultures, were buying up the debt, and government services were suffering as a result in Puerto Rico way back in 2015. And Bernie was meeting with the ambassador then because he was fighting for Puerto Rico in Congress. And then at the time of the hurricane and after the hurricane, he was the leading figure in Congress trying to get relief for Puerto Rican Americans. And insofar as they were successful, it owed some to Bernie's efforts. So anyway, in 2015, in the summer of 2015, I attended a panel that was in the Senate here that was sponsored by Bernie Sanders. And he was the original chair. And the main subject of the panel was actually Greece and the hardship that Greece was going through. It was the crisis, in Greece, and the fact that the monetary authorities, in Europe, were holding Greece hostage, to the Euro bankers. And that was hitting Greece very, very hard and imposing austerity on Greece. Most of the panel, was about that. But before Bernie began to talk about that in the introduction, he talked about the austerity that was then coming to Puerto Rico. as a result of the activities of the vultures. And the ambassador from Puerto Rico was there, saying, okay, a few words. I covered this in my book on austerity, okay, in Greece. It's on my website. So if you're interested, take a look. Okay, it's very good in going through the details of the panel. The substantive part of the panel was chaired by Stephanie Kelton, by the way. Jamie Galbraith was another member of the panel. Joe Stiglitz was a third member of the panel. And the fourth member was someone by the name of actually Kierkegaard. Oh yes, it was Jacob by Kierkegaard, and he is a neoliberal economist of the Austrian school. Okay, and I believe at that time he was with the Heritage Foundation or something. Anyway, they had him on the panel for balance, and of course, he was defending the Troika, okay, in Europe, okay, and their policies. And that, by the way, was quite fascinating. And Bonnie is pointing to the clock because I've been on for nearly 2 hours and I probably have overstayed my welcome, though I still see that 13 of you are here. But anyway, the point is Bernie has been friendly to Puerto Rico and fighting for Puerto Ricans for a very long time. And now he has the support of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the mayor of San Juan. And the Puerto Ricans in Florida, who are very numerous right now, I think are all going to go for Bernie. Carmen says, like how she stood up to 45, she could be a hell of a good VP too. Ohio reported the first couple of cases of the coronavirus. A little snark there, huh? A couple of days ago, but they aren't but telling us where. SMH. Yep. They're hiding the information as if that's going to protect the public, right? And Barbara Warning says, but come on, we have to be realistic. Let's not be, well, I shouldn't say that. We ought to be realistic, but we need to get out there and fight because it's realistic to say we still can win. We've got to get out there and fight, and we've got to make it happen. And those of us who physically can't fight, but who are able to donate some amounts. If you give a little frequently, it goes a long way. Can all be a big help to Bernie. Kay says Biden is a Republican. Yep. Yes. Okay. In another time, in another place, he would have been a Republican. Actually, he would have been a Southern Democrat. Rob says, you notice Biden hasn't really done much media. They're hiding Biden, but you can't do it forever. They're going to try. They're going to keep trying. They're going to take a lot of ads now that he's going to have a lot of money. And they're going to try to sell them with the canned ads where they can X out his gaffes and they can X out his lack of coherence. Barbara says Biden is non-viable. Kay says several people have seen their family members go through Alzheimer's say he has all these symptoms. Yes, I seem to see the symptoms too. I haven't had family members who have gone through Alzheimer's, but I think I recognize the symptoms. Okay. I had a friend, okay, who died, okay, of Alzheimer's. First, he came down with Parkinson's, and then it developed into Alzheimer's. Kay says maybe they're planning to handpick a VP for Biden knowing the VP will have to run things. Of course they are. Of course they are. Maybe that's why they want Stacey Abrams. Steve says he does, and Barbara says, what his family is doing is abusive. I would never let my father make a fool of himself like this. And Rob says, with all due respect, I really hate Tulsi. I don't think Tulsi will do anything. Tulsi did do anything in any debate when she was there. Why should she do it now? Tulsi destroyed Kamala Harris in 3 minutes, Rob. That's why Kamala Harris finally had to get out of the race. She was riding high until those 3 minutes. Then Tulsi exposed her extreme dishonesty and her real record in California. And that was it for Kamala Harris. After that, she kept going progressively down and down and down and down until she finally had to withdraw. She got destroyed by Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi is capable of doing the same thing to Joe Biden. Kay says, Steve, the guy who does the Humanist Report, Kay, on YouTube News, the Humanist Report is just lost his dad to Alzheimer's. Okay. I don't think his name is Steve. Anyway, I watch his program very frequently, and I'm having a senior moment actually right now. No, not. Steve says, Doc, did you see Trump making fun of Biden's Alzheimer's today? He's already destroying Biden. And Russ says, yes, run third party. And Carmen says, yes, great commentary about Bernie and the delegates' reply to Evelina. And Evelina joined, and my daughter Devorah joined. Hi, honey. And Evelina said, Green Party? Evelina, it's a very small party, though. It is a very small party, but if they're on the ballot in 46 states or in 48 states, or maybe in all 50 states, then they can serve as a vehicle for Bernie if they're willing this time. Under Jill Stein, they were willing to serve as a vehicle. I don't know if they would under Howie Hawkins. Howie Hawkins is right now their presidential candidate, if I recall correctly. Kay says we need a People's Party. The People's Party is getting organized to have an alternative convention in Milwaukee, right down the road from the Democrats. And the Movement for a People's Party, Kay, is organizing that. But Teresa Sanders is part of that. So you might want to look her up on Facebook. Kay says, too late for a real third party this time, Evelina, but we should be working on that. We should start working on that now, because if we don't start working on that now, then it will be too late to have the real third party in 2022 as well. Kay said, well, I'm tired and off to bed for tonight. Have a peaceful night all, and we'll talk soon. Enjoyed the chat with all of you. And Russ says, under the present system, more and more people will be exposed and infected. That's true. And Evelina said, almost willingly forgot about the virus. It will come to bear in the next few months, probably. Yeah, in the next months. I think it will. Evelina says, sleep well. Yes, everybody sleep well. And when the homeless get corona and don't get treatment and are spreading it, I hate to think what will happen under Trump. Night K. I think as this is happening, we have to organize and put such heavy pressure on Trump that he absolutely knows he's going to lose in the fall if he doesn't get a Medicare for All bill passed that will cover everybody immediately, completely. Carmen says, the Kung flu worries me as Bernie is campaigning. Worries me too. If he's not already been in Washington, he's going to Washington probably on this swing. He's probably going to be in Washington tomorrow or the next day. Evelina says, the thought of people dying in the streets is just too much for me. Of course, the spread is not a good thing at all. Carmen says, austerity is murder. Yes, it is murder. Evelina says, me too, but I don't even want to dwell on it. Stacy Van Veen has joined. Rob Rivera says, from an article I'm reading, it says this discrepancies between the exit poll and the vote count for Sanders and Biden totaled 8.2%, double the 4.0 exit poll margin. Warren's and Biden's discrepancy totaled 8.0%, also double the margin. Right. So that's as I said, 16 points gone to Biden that should have gone to the other two candidates. That totally changes the result. Totally changes the result. I think Biden had, what, 34.5% of the vote there? 34.5% of the vote. I will double check that right now. Biden had 33.6% there, and Bernie had 26.7%. So Bernie would have had 34.9%, and Biden would have lost a total of 8.6 points. So he would have been down at roughly 24 points or 23 points. Okay, and Elizabeth Warren would have gained 8 points, so she would have been up at 29 points and would have had a second place finish, fairly close to Bernie, if the vote had been exactly the same as the exit polls predicted. So that's what happened. The exit polls, there was a tremendous discrepancy, and the issue is how uh, what happened to create this particular discrepancy, which is statistically significant, which means it could not have occurred by chance alone. Yeah, that article was previously circulated by Susan Eldridge. We were aware of it actually last night. You ought to watch the video for last night's program, Rob, also. Evelina said, except that the other progressive didn't and doesn't care, but Bernie should care. Didn't someone from his campaign say they would look into it? Uh, okay, I don't know, but I suspect some people in Massachusetts are going to look into it because they don't like the idea that their votes were stolen when they voted not only for Bernie, but they voted for Warren. 16 points worth of their votes were stolen. 16.6 points. I'm sure they're angry as hell about that. Russ has a need to turn in two. See you soon. See you again soon. Okay, Russ, we'll see you again. And Margot says, "Thank you. I'm always comforted by your opinions. I don't mean always to deliver comfort. I mean, I'm really alarmed, and I want us to really keep fighting as hard as we can for Bernie Sanders. There are some things that I said that you can take comfort in, certainly. Things are far from over, but we got to fight harder than ever." And Carmen says trotting out Joe at this point is just elder abuse. And Evelina says the media is a disaster in the Spanish language. Mike Figueredo. Yeah, Figueredo. That's his name. Okay, Mike Figueredo, Lana. That's right. Absolutely. Thank you, Lana. Evelina says, then they have the churches also anti-Bernie. Yeah, Jim Clyburn is very close to the black churches in South Carolina. So they would go along with Clyburn's endorsement, and they would go for Biden because they went for Obama. I have to say they're really very foolish because they would get such a better deal from Bernie Sanders. It isn't even funny. They really sold out their congregations by doing this. I'm sorry to have to say that, but I think it's true. Stacy says it lost viability in Maryland, so my registration was kicked out into unaffiliated. Well, you mean the Green Party lost their viability in Maryland? Evelina says Dr. Joe is great, uplifting, and so smart. Thank you, Evelina. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Any more comments or questions? I'll try to get my chin above the horizon again. I promise. I see on my screen here that I'm no longer above the horizon. While you're thinking of whether to do something, I will again refresh my page. Stacy says, yes, the Green Party. Yes, the Green Party. And that's my last comment. So I'll say goodnight, okay, to the 10 of you who are still here. And I'll see you again on Saturday night, unless something very special happens tomorrow. Thank you very much for sharing. I could use some more shares, I see. I'd appreciate it if you do some more for me before leaving. And I hope to see you again in the 9 o'clock hour sometime on Saturday night. Thanks very much for coming. Have a great day tomorrow. I'm going to have a great day tomorrow. Hasta mañana indeed. Hasta mañana indeed. Okay.